The question is, what's council tax in the UK? And are you managing correctly to avoid fines and avoid falling into the traps that nowadays you can find, which can cost you a lot of money? Let's have a look. Council tax in the UK is a valuation system. It's a way for the government, for the local councils, to get a source of income and cover some of the services they provide, which is a good thing to have. Now, this council tax obviously depends on the size of the house, it depends on the location, it depends on different aspects that the government has decided would represent the valuation of a property. Therefore, the government has created bands, normally it's A to H, and in those bands, there are certain valuations so it's bands A to H, which is 8 bands, where the government, at least in England and Scotland, they set up in 1991 those bands with the valuations at the time and would say basically properties that are valued, this is no market prices, this is valuation at that time, are valued within these ranges, then they will have certain charge. And every year they can increase that council tax up to certain value, which councils normally try to maximize to cover as much as possible their costs or their expenses, I would say. Now, as you probably know, there is certain hierarchy to this. So the one who's living in the property, normally, which is as the resident, would be the one to pay. But within that, you have the resident freeholder would be the one to pay first, then the resident tenant, then the resident licensee, if there is one, and if the property is empty, then the non-resident owner would have to pay the council tax for the property. Now, what if you have squatters? Incredibly enough, they would have to pay council tax if they are there. That's the first tip for you to know. Now, the fact that they pay in practice, that's a different thing. But in the law, if they're occupying your property, they are liable to pay for that council tax. Now, within the council tax, which normally is an important expense if you have a single let or you have a HMO or another type of property, is very important. It's a very important cost of that equation. But if you have one person living along there, that person can get a discount, a 25% discount. If you have full students in your property, you could apply for 100% exemption for that council tax, which would be an important saving. And if there is somebody with severe impairment, then that person could actually apply for 100% discount. So taking all this into account and understanding what's the situation year to year of your tenant and your property, you could actually save yourself some money, or you can help that tenant save some of that tax, which is actually something, any money that can be saved in a property, any money that can be saved in taxes is a very good idea. Now, here's where it gets a little bit complex. Because of the scarcity of properties in the UK, the government has introduced something which is called the empty homes surcharges. And you can actually see these across the whole UK. And which basically says that if you're leaving your property empty for a certain time, then they won't charge you your normal rent, your normal council tax, but they will charge you extra. They will charge you a premium. So if you have your home empty for at least a year or after a year, you won't have to pay 100%, you have to pay 200%. And then from then on, until you reach a maximum of 400%. So that's what they could charge you. So for example, if you have a property which you are refurbishing and the refurbishment takes over a year, the council is likely to charge you 200% of the council tax for the whole year for that property. And then you would be talking about not a council tax of maybe £2,000 a year, but you could be talking about £4,000 a year. And really, there is no escape from this unless your house is kind of just a shell. Doesn't have floors, doesn't have roofs, doesn't have toilets. So it's completely beyond repair. At that point, you can apply for an exception. But councils are getting stricter by the day and trying to avoid losing income from properties which are empty. When they say, well, your property is empty, you could repair it, you could fix it, why don't you do so? If you don't do so, in the meantime, I'll charge you 200, 300% more council tax so you can feel the pain and go and repair it. Now, something important about council tax is that it's a statutory payment, meaning that if you don't pay, the government can take you to court. They will get a liability order and they can access your bank account and take that money away from you. So before you try to avoid paying that council tax, then remember that. Now, this is another one which is very important and is actually what triggered this video, which is something called HMO disaggregation. It turns out that about 2 years ago or 3 years ago, some councils started going to HMOs and say, okay, you have a HMO with 6 rooms, those are 6 different tenants, and therefore I'm going to charge you 6 different council bills. And if you had offered your property to those tenants as bills included, you would be paying not just one bill, but 6, and it would be a lot more expensive. And some colleagues of mine, they actually end up owing 50, 60,000 pounds to the council because the charges were quite high. Now, fortunately, and this is when the landlords getting together and fighting for our rights actually works, the government had to get a clarification out saying, no, councils cannot do that. And this is something very critical for you if you have HMOs to understand and to know that if your council right now is doing disaggregation to your HMO, you have the tools to stop them and to tell them, no, you cannot do that. You need to stop it because this can easily make a HMO become a liability for you as an owner. And therefore, it's very important that you look for it and you understand that, believe it or not, as I said, this video was recorded because some people nowadays, today, after about 3 years, this reform came in, they are still suffering from it, meaning the local council they are located at, they probably don't know this and they just keep applying these sort of outrageous charges. If you stop paying, as I said before, this is a liability problem. It's a liability issue for you as a person or as a limited company. The council will quickly remind you you haven't paid, then will basically take you to a court hearing. So you pay, they will get a liability order and then enforcement where they can actually get some money from your bank account if they decide to take it that far. So the councils, they protect their income at all costs. And I see the reason why. They will collect the rubbish, maintain the streets, and do a lot for the council itself. And therefore, being this one of the main sources of income, they will do whatever it takes to recover that money. Now, in the past, there have been some people trying to play smart and playing using the concept of non-consent, of Magna Carta, to say, no, I'm not going to pay council tax. I refuse to do so. When in that happening is they were taken to court and some of them were taken to prison because they refused to pay something which is a statutory duty, meaning you have to do it. Now, some important tips for you when you are investing in property in terms of council tax. As soon as the process is completed, meaning the contracts have been exchanged and completion has taken place, inform the council about the ownership of that property so you can basically start paying. Set up a direct debit and hopefully you are in a time of the year which is around April or March, where that's the financial year for consuls, and they normally charge in 10 installments. You can call them and tell them, please charge me in 12 installments. That's going to kind of help you cash flow for your property and at least reduce that burden of a higher installment that you need to. Also, review if you can apply to any of the exemptions. If you are doing, for example, a HMO and it's full of students, then you can go and request a full exemption, and you could easily, up in the north, you could be saving £200 per month easily. Also, when you create the contract or create the account with them, please stay on top of it. We have a couple of properties which we created a new account not long ago, about 2 months, and we're being on top of it, trying to ask, where is the invoice? Where are we going to pay? How is this going to be done? And we never got the email. And what we had to do is we had to go to the property physically because they only sent a letter. And even though we've been on top of it, they're now sending these reminders that we need to pay. If you're not calling them, if you're not trying to find out how you can pay them, please, I want to give you my money, they basically will assume you don't want to pay, and then they will take action. So that's for you, the consul. You're trying to deal with a department or normally a part of the government which might not be 100% efficient in their processes, but then you're still maybe liable for that inefficiency. Therefore, you need to be worried and need to be organized enough to ensure you have a direct debit, and the direct debit is coming out every month. And check effectively that that direct debit is coming out every month, because sometimes, for no reason, it's happened to me, the council tax gets canceled and you have no idea that you are accruing money and potentially a fine. So check at the end of the month if you have paid or not, and then if you haven't, then that's either because you have 10 installments and then during 2 months they won't charge you, or something happened, they cancel the council tax, and then you're starting to get in trouble. This is not Cardona. You can know more about us at propertycashflow.co.uk. If you have properties in Liverpool or Wirral that you want managed, please send me a message at info@propertycashflow.co.uk, or send me a WhatsApp message to 07411904124, and I'll be happy to help. Also, if you want to invest in those areas, we know those areas really well. We know the numbers that work. We know the strategies that work. So please do let us know, and we'll be happy to help you with your investment needs. Thank you very much, and I'll see you on the next one.